There's a new warning today about the number of Canadians at risk of going hungry and concerns the situation will only get worse. A new report out this morning says people in Ontario using food banks for the first time. The number of that group has risen dramatically, and the food banks may not be able to keep up. Here's one of the big numbers in the report that's just come out today from Feed Ontario. Nearly 600,000 adults and children in the province had to access emergency food support last year. Food bank visits are up 42% from pre-pandemic levels, and 1 in 3 of those visitors are using food banks for the first time. Let's bring in Natalie Collada, who's been reporting on this all morning and has the details again on this increased number of people in the province having to go to food banks to feed themselves and their children.
And of course, a big concern, Heather, particularly as we're heading into that holiday season. According to Feed Ontario, since last year, nearly 600,000 people in the province had to access emergency food supports, and that's a 42% increase from pre-pandemic levels. Now, first-time visitors, that has also increased since 2019 by 64%. 1 in 3 of those people turning to food banks now have never had to do so before. So that is, of course, a concern. Almost a third of those individuals are now first-time users to order to feed their family. The report also shows that the people who are using food banks, there is a 47% increase in the number of people with jobs using food banks. That is, of course, a big concern. That's since 2018. The executive director of Feed Ontario released a statement talking a bit about this, saying looking at long-standing income security trends, data shows that it is harder for someone to break the cycle of poverty today than it was more than 30 years ago. And of course, lots of numbers there, Heather, but what it is all adding up to is a big concern when it comes to food security, not just in the province of Ontario, but really right across this country.
And that's an important thing to highlight because we had a report similarly just a few weeks ago, Natalie, which looked at the national picture, and exactly what we're seeing in Ontario is playing out in food banks right across Canada.
And the reason why, Heather, we're really seeing is sort of the fallout of inflation, the rising cost of living, all of this making it very difficult for people right across this country to be able to feed themselves and their families. And that, of course, coming from research from Food Banks Canada, who say almost half of Canadians are buying less food or lower quality food in order to make ends meet. Nearly 1 in 5 said since March 2020 there was at least one instance where they were hungry because they didn't eat because there wasn't enough money for food. Food bank usage, we know, right across the country up about 35%. Some of the highest increases we are seeing are actually in Alberta, where the number of people using food banks jumped 73% from pre-pandemic levels between March and October of this year alone. The number of food bank visits in Alberta hit 156,000, with 1/3 of those visits coming from children. So we know that is, of course, a big concern as well. We are, of course, tracking all the details and the fallout from this as well. Heather?
Natalie, thank you very much. Natalie Collada with the report. Now, of course, we like to look at the numbers and the trends and then see how they are playing out and how they're being experienced in the food banks of this country. Rachel Wilson is back with us, who's the CEO of the Ottawa Food Bank. We often turn to her to sort of help us understand a report like this better. So good morning, Rachel, and welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You were listening to Natalie's numbers there, some of the headline numbers, a 64% increase in first-time visitors, so more people, more visits. Are you seeing there in Ottawa similar sorts of a trend?
Unfortunately, we are. We're seeing a 37% increase in the number of visits. So the number of people is increasing, but also the number of times people need to access a food bank is increasing. So we're seeing a dramatic spike here. And again, just like everyone else is seeing, these are historic and unprecedented numbers in our 40-year history.
So how is that affecting what you have there in the food bank in terms of supply? I'm wondering if you're able to keep up, or if you are, as some food banks are reporting, sometimes even running out.
Well, as you can see here, we do have quite a few empty shelves right now. We know it's very challenging for people to be able to purchase their own groceries. And so when we rely on donations as well, they tend to go down because the cost of food is just so high. This is only half of our warehouse, but you can see that there are many empty cages. And we're hoping that this holiday season we'll be able to refill most of these empty spots.
Do you have to turn people away ever, Rachel, because there isn't enough supply there?
Right now, we haven't had to turn people away, but we are hearing consistently from our network that they are having to reduce their hours, reduce the number of times people can come, and some of the programs are also closing. So we are seeing times where people are being asked to come back only once or only twice, as opposed to as many times as they actually need.
I mean, what is that like to be able, people who are so desperate to come for food, emergency food, and have to turn them away?
The stress is unbelievable, not only for the people who are accessing food banks, but for the people who are running the programs as well. The emotional toll is very high, and we're just unfortunately not really seeing an end in sight, which is really problematic for everyone in this system.
And in terms of causes for all of this, the report mentions, as Natalie was just talking about, inflation. We know the cost of everything is going up, but that seems to be something that's an immediate concern right now. How much is it the factor, or are there longer-term causes that you're still dealing with, Rachel?
Well, social assistance rates still do not keep pace with the cost of living, even before the inflation. And now with the inflation, it's near impossible. When 60% of people who access a food bank are on some form of social assistance, we know that that need gets even deeper. Housing here in Ottawa continues to be unaffordable for most people. So we're looking at things that are both immediate and long-term.
The head of Feed Ontario, I think in the statement, made quite a poignant comment that it's harder to break the cycle of poverty now than it was 30 years ago. Would you add to that, or agree with that, or add anything to that statement?
We are unfortunately seeing the cycle of poverty continue, where we are seeing generation after generation now coming to access food banks. Many of our food banks are located in community housing, so affordable housing. And the people that work there are telling me that they are seeing, families coming, older generation, and now the next generation are also coming. So we know that this, unfortunately, is something very difficult to get out of, because food insecurity is caused by a lack of income. And when you don't have the income you need, you are less healthy, your emotional toll is higher, your education opportunities are less. This really is something that affects also the people who are accessing food banks, but the whole community. When anyone is not thriving, it affects everyone that lives in this city.
How do you expect this holiday season to go, Rachel?
We're expecting a 15% increase of the number of people accessing the food banks just into December, so we know the need is going to be very high. Thankfully, we live in an incredible community here in Ottawa that is very generous. We're 98% funded by the community. We don't receive provincial or federal funding, so we rely very heavily on donations. And we know that our community has been very generous before, and we hope they'll be generous again this season.
That's going to be the story in food banks right across the province, apparently, based on what we're reading today and what you've, again, brought to life for us this morning. Rachel Wilson, the CEO of the Ottawa Food Bank, I thank you, as always, for the time today.
Thank you.